Ain't you sick of giving me your money?
Oh, I know he didn't do it, baby.
Hold on a second. Whoa, where you going?
No, I'm about to go make these drop offs.
Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Bradley DLO Thomas coming from the second season of Black Currency Podcast. Glad that everybody could tune in. By day, I am a marketing professional. By night, I'm an MC, producer, also learning how to DJ. So let me pass the mic.
What's going on? Shout out to your studio room at home. I'm really liking the look of that. This is Corey Dashed Up Whitmore. I am owner and founder of Media 22, also connected to Studio 22 and Radio 22. Happy to be in this new season and back with a star guest too.
Oh yeah. You know we had to bring the OG back. So
wait a minute, don't know, Martinez, I'm the triple OG.
The triple OG. The OG's OG, right?
Yeah.
So we were so blessed to have him as part of the first season. And now what we want to do is, we want to highlight a program that has some great aspects to it. It is called the C.L.I.M.B program. The main mission of this program is to create and coordinate regenerative economic empowerment ecosystems in which serve the youth, families, and communities so that they can grow and thrive. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the programs because we're going to talk about that. But this is something that we really, the Madison community, to really embrace, and eventually we would like to expand this outward. But I feel so blessed to have him on to talk about this program, so you all can get involved and get an idea about this C.L.I.M.B program that he has been doing. So, with that being said, Bob, can you give us a history of C.L.I.M.B and how did it actually start?
Well, that's an interesting question because C.L.I.M.B does have a fairly extensive background as far as the history is concerned. Been involved and interested in financial literacy for a very long time, for literally 2 decades, and started out creating a nonprofit as I left working in state government, focus on financial education through a different nonprofit that was Asset Builders. And the C.L.I.M.B program was actually a program there in Asset Builders, which was funded by several funding sources, including a national grant. We got that started in the mid-2000s, 04, 05, and it was not launched with a lot of heft at that time. We did learn a lot. We got about 30 clubs started, but some of them did not sustain. So the whole effort went dormant for over 15 years. And then back in 2019 to 2020, we began to realize that while all financial literacy is very important, there were still some pieces that were missing in terms of where financial literacy experts were going into depth, especially as it related to communities of color. The area of investing, basic economics, and to some degree, entrepreneurship. More of the programming was focused on, of other financial literacy was focused on balancing a checkbook, saving, other personal finance and credit issues. So we just found a real open niche to get more in depth there and thought it would be better to create a nonprofit that's more singularly focused on the investment education piece. I've had the background from even a larger, older nonprofit, Better Investing, that has really pioneered the investment club model for over 70 years, and also have had my licenses in the financial services industry. So I felt that I was uniquely qualified to bring the message, content, and the education into communities of color that generally were not getting exposed actually to investing.
That's also, with all that being said, that's a lot. I mean, I'm so glad that you are doing that. What was it that sparked the passion for you to even think about the things that you're doing right now to make that transition from working a 9-to-5 position into getting into this field of financial literacy? And not just that, but creating programs. That's a whole nother step.
Yeah, well, I worked for the state of Wisconsin for 25 years, and some of that was at the State Department of Commerce, which was the predecessor of WEDC. So as a good bureaucrat, you do learn how to create programs. So I had a lot of program creation experience from my bureaucracy days working for state government. But it was during that time where I was director of the Bureau of Minority Business Development that I just became, well, first of all, the sort of conversation in the community was that there was a lack of access to capital. So my first efforts in the late 80s into the 90s was to create programs that would provide capital to minority and small entrepreneurs. That included the Minority Business Development Fund or Early Planning Grant Program. And we still had to deny some people from getting those loans. And it turns out it was consistently because of poor credit history, lack of understanding of financial statements. And the one that really got me was lack of net worth. Sometimes people actually had negative net worth. And then what really got me is that there were mid-aged people, 30s, even into their 50s, that I had to explain what net worth meant.
Oh, wow.
Then I realized that as far as economic development is concerned, we're creating a house of cards that will never stand if people don't understand the basics. You can't just give loans or money to folks and not really teach them what the game really is all about.
Right.
And the game is not so much about earning income as it is knowing what to do with your income. And the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad spells it out better than most. And that's simply that you need to take your income and acquire income producing assets. And it's the assets that creates actual wealth. And wealth is basically being able to survive your lifestyle on your assets generating your income as opposed to your hard labor generating your income. So when I found out the wealth gap statistics based on race, I literally just jumped out of my chair and realized that we're never really going to be able to empower our community and elevate the quality of life unless we're able to do something about the lack of wealth. The data hasn't changed since 20 years ago, pretty much. That is that the households that are run by Caucasians have about 10 times more wealth in terms of median net worth than Blacks. And this U.S. Bureau of the Census that tracks all of that information. The most recent data that I saw, I think, was looking at 2019. And the median wealth for a white household was $188,000. Median, of course, is another key phrase and concept. It means half the households have more than that number, half have less. So we don't deal with average.
Thank you for explaining that.
Mean because Oprah and Shaq throw the average off. They're so well. Same is true with Bezos and Zuckerberg in the non-minority community. Look at median. And that means half have more, half have less. 188,000 for white households. It was 24,000 for Latino households. And it was about 19,000 median net worth for Black households. Median. Half have more than that number. Half the households have less than that number, which is also telling you that a lot of Black households are actually operating with negative net worth. I just saw this as Rome on fire, that this is a emergency condition within our community and that somebody has to get into this with a lot of energy and passion, because it's like trying to reverse a mighty flowing river. A lot of our wealth is flowing out of our hands and out of our communities at a very fast and mighty pace. And we've got to get into those communities and literally reverse that flow, begin to have more of the wealth captured in our community and creating equity and wealth for people who look like us, so to speak.
In addition, one thing that you said that I think the listeners should really pay attention to is how you started. I mean, you gave us some great information, things that people really need to take in heed. But you took your 9-to-5 hustle, you took those skills, and then you took that to the independent grind of what you can offer to the community. So it's a great
funny
thing.
Because I was on the phone with a gentleman from Chicago, very successful young professional. He has a group that's going to start a nonprofit that wants to sort of serve the development of their professional network. And I actually tried my best to caution him against starting a nonprofit, because when you really understand how the platform of our economy works, it's all based on for-profit, market-driven, capital markets, and the wealth is in the private sector. And the government jobs are really just stepping stones. Nonprofit jobs are really altruistic, charity, and you're not really going to build wealth for yourself. And what we really lack in our community is that hard driving private sector area. And so you're exactly right. Life is a little bit like that jujitsu where it can be oppressive, but you've got to find the flow that fits for you and then really move out into the community and do the work that you want to do, but do it in a way that you can monetize it and that you can help at the same time. And that's basically what I found. Mine, it was nonprofit, but it's not something I'm proud of, and it's not something I recommend for other people, because to be very honest, if I had to do over again, I would have tried to figure out a way to do what I do in a market-driven private sector.
Can you speak to, we have this dichotomy between the non-for-profit and for-profit. Can you speak more to some of those weaknesses or some of those barriers by starting as a nonprofit? I want to get into C.L.I.M.B, but I find this conversation fascinating because a number of people that I've been in contact with talking about business have really overwhelmingly talked more about moving towards nonprofit versus for-profit. So I am fascinated by this point of view. If there are things that you could add as far as some of those, like I said, some of those barriers or some of those things that maybe some people aren't taking into consideration when moving towards that nonprofit, that may be capping their ability to really build wealth.
Right. Just before we got on the air, I think I let you know that I had applied for a big grant and went through a lot of hoops trying to get that grant money for the nonprofit. And they just said a big fat no. Right. And that's a whole nother story, because I think sometimes philanthropists don't necessarily want to see lower income people actually learn how to invest, because everybody in the capitalist society cannot be wealthy. I'll refer you to Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, and he comments on the capitalism and talks about how formulaic building wealth actually is. And it's just a blend, the right kind of blend of financial capital, labor, and raw materials. And just like baking a cake, if you don't put the flour, the eggs, and the sugar together right, you're going to have a pure mess. But if you put it together correctly, with a right formula, you're going to have a beautiful thing. And the same is true with those resources that create wealth. We just never really understood that. But to get to your question, I distinctly remember a good friend of mine who was on our nonprofit board of directors, and she was a for-profit person. Quite honestly, she owns several fast food restaurants, and they call them more family style restaurants. But she would get into those board meetings and be totally perplexed. All right, Bob, you're working really hard over here trying to raise the money, but these aren't the people you really serve. Then you try to get that money after you've spent more than 50% of your time trying to get the money. You run over here, and what little time you have left, you serve those people. So you have two jobs, and I don't understand, why would you want to set yourself up to have two hard jobs? Because serving our people is hard too, I'm gonna tell you, especially if you're trying to get them to build wealth. And she was just saying, in my business, you know, I do a good job of serving my clients. They pay me for what I'm doing. So I have one job, and I have to do my job very well, but I make money. Not to mention the fact that as my company does its job well and creates wealth within the company, if I own the company, I own the wealth that's growing within my company. C.L.I.M.B USA can do the best job of any nonprofit in the whole country, and Bob Wynn is never going to own C.L.I.M.B USA. So my labor is serving the community and doing very good things, but I'm not creating any sort of legacy of wealth for my family, C.L.I.M.B USA. Whereas this business owner is building wealth, and her children are going to benefit from that, and her children's children will benefit from that. Now, what I am trying to do, and this gets back into C.L.I.M B, is to encourage more people to just take those baby steps and start through collective economics and our investment club model that we call community-based investment enterprises, because those you do own. So one thing that C.L.I.M B is doing, and I try to explain to state policymakers, and they're listening, is that we're more like a chamber of commerce than we are your traditional nonprofit, because we're not just, you know, serving at a food pantry or ringing the bell to ask for donations, but we're helping communities to learn to invest and build their wealth. And we're doing so by helping them to create business entities that can then be stepping stones for larger entrepreneurial or wealth building endeavors in the future. So part of C.L.I.M.B's big role is to help create businesses, but they're all the same kind of business: investment enterprises, AKA investment clubs, but we call them investment enterprises, so that policymakers can understand that C.L.I.M.B USA is not your regular nonprofit. We are a special nonprofit that's actually helping to lift the community up by helping multiple community groups to start their own investment enterprise, which in turn is helping them to start their own quest and journey for building wealth.
Do we want to try and jump, since you just mentioned the investment clubs? Do you think that'll be a great place for us to start in going through some of the things that C.L.I.M.B has to offer folks? Would you mind starting at that spot?
Okay, you want me to just go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, as Bradley referred, when you go to CLIMBUSA.org and hit the drop-down menu, you will see 9 different programs. However, we have learned to refer to 3 programs as a sequential trilogy of programs that really undergird our ecosystem. The first one is our stock market experience. Right now, it's called the Summer Stock Market Experience because we offer it outside of school during the summer, where we're training young people, middle school and high school students, on the investment process on a simulated investment platform. That's our stock market experience. And we'll be cranking that up again this coming spring and summer. And I hope that more and more people who work with young people, including parents, will get their young people oriented. There's no need to grow into adulthood not knowing how to buy Nike stock, because all the kids learn how to buy Nike shoes. That's an inequity, to know how to buy the shoes and not know how to buy the stock. That's a number one inequity that we're looking to fight. So the second trilogy program is our C.L.I.M.B Youth Leaders program. That's one where we meet more intensively with young people once a week and basically orient them to what we call the economic way of thinking. The sessions are every Friday at 4:30 Central Time. That's the registration link where people can just go onto the C.L.I.M.B USA website and find the Youth Leaders page, click and get the link, whether you're an adult and just want to come in and observe, or parent, or a middle or high school student themselves. And every Friday, that's not a holiday Friday, we're there and meeting with our young people through the school year. This year, we're going to finish up on March 31st. And that's when we'll have a capstone where young people like the young lady there will be speaking about what they have learned throughout the semester or the year. The third program is what we were referring to earlier, and that is our community-based investment enterprise, or the investment club program. And this is the one where we're doing the heavy lift. The photo on the page there is a group in Milwaukee that got started in October of 2017, before C.L.I.M.B was officially founded. And so this is one of our case study investment enterprises that we're tracking and seeing how well they do and what they are learning as they go. But essentially, we are teaching people how to start the collective approach to building wealth through an investment enterprise. And it's normally about 15 people putting in $25 per month. If there are young people that have been part of the C.L.I.M.B Youth Leaders program, C.L.I.M.B actually raises funds to pay for the $25 per month for the youth while they're in school. We've now had 4 of our youth out of the Milwaukee area to graduate from high school, and they've decided to stay involved with us. And so, sort of like expanding the plan, we've decided to continue to pay their $25 a month, even while they're in college, as long as they agree to become peer educators and take what they are learning and help to teach some of the younger people who are still in middle school and high school. I can share with you the case study investment clubs. Working backwards, case study C is the one that you see right there, and it's the newer of the 3 case study clubs. It got started in October of 2017. It has about $25,000 in it now, with people just putting in $25 a month, and they haven't really gained a lot through the stocks that they own yet. So the amount they put in is very similar to the amount of the value of the portfolio, because investing is a very long-term proposition. That's another way that we're very different. We're asking policymakers and supporters to give us 2 decades to show what we can do. And that leads into the case study number 2, or case study B, which is my own family club. It got started in the year 2000. So it is 22 years old. The current portfolio value is $172,000. It would be closer to $250,000, but we have had individuals pull out funds for other economic development pursuits. 2 accounts have been used for buying homes. Another account has been used for an entrepreneurial project, and another account has been used for an older member who wanted to de-risk some of her own personal portfolio. And that's how we see these clubs as being used. They're not like a candy store where you're going to take some money out so you can go to the movies and see the new Black Panther movie or something like that. To really let it build and grow as a portfolio so that it operates more like the old time wells. When I was growing up, going to my grandmother's, and you dip the bucket down in the well and just pull up some more water, and you just kept doing it, and it seemed to never run out. And that's because the ground supply was plentiful enough coming. And that's how really wealth does work. Once you get to a certain amount, it just continues to replenish itself. We as a community just never let the wealth build to that point where we have these nest eggs that continue to replenish. And so the case study B, the amount we put in is about 55,000. And like I said, it's now valued at 172. So over 2 decades, you can see that we've made over about 130,000 just on the growth of the stock market. And then that doesn't even include the 50,000 that's already been pulled out. Case study A, which is the number one that Dr. Floyd Rose and I started in 1987, probably before you guys were born. But basically that one, as of September of 2021, because we're no longer members, but we track it, that club had $951,000. And that was only after 500,000 had been taken out for various purposes.
Damn.
Matter of fact,
wow,
that's amazing.
Story on that one because
okay,
out with 17 African Americans and 4 Caucasians, but by September 21st, it was flipped, and it was no more than about 2 African Americans, and the Caucasians are the one that sort of sustained it and kept it going and growing. And one reason I bring that up is because a lot of them, not a lot, but several of them took out funds to buy properties in Florida. And, you know, most of us grow up, if you got one house, you're good. And then, you know, I was looking at my wife and saying, you know, we like to go down south a lot. And why don't we, you know, take some of our money and buy a place in Florida? And we looked at Florida. We went down and actually found a place. This was before the recession in 2008. And it was a nice 2-bedroom, 2 baths for just $110,000. But then my wife put her foot down, said she did not want to own any property in Florida. But we ended up finding a nice condo, less costly than that, in North Carolina at the beach. And we bought that. And the down payment just came right out of our investment enterprise. So those are the kinds of things. And today we own it. We were just going over some comparative values. And I hadn't done the calculation, but it has quadrupled in value over that time. And now, you know, it's paid for. So this is what, you know, again, very long-term, kind of arduous, especially those first few years. But if people can tough it out on the other side, you know, there's really, literally kind of a financial emancipation that occurs.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so you covered the 3 programs. I'm also curious as to how much the houses were worth for the people that took the money out and add that to the pot too.
I like talking to young people. Y'all granular.
I mean, I could go in like 4 or 5 different directions right now, but I want to stay focused because we want to talk about your program. You mentioned the 3, which is cool. I'm glad that you put it in a sequence for us. I was curious about, looks like there's 3 other programs, and I'm curious as why you set it up this way. Like, why do you believe the stock is first, and then the youth builders leaders is second, and then the investment club is third? How did you, what's the philosophy behind it?
Well, like I say, you know, I'm constantly writing proposals, and you have to write in a way that people can digest what it is that you're doing and who you are. They just cannot get their minds around 9 programs. And I realized that very quickly. I had to really distill down to, you know, what is really the gist that they can absorb. And actually, one of our greatest supporters has been CUNA Mutual Foundation. So thank you very much.
That's out to CUNA Mutual.
Yeah. So the other thing is, you know, I've done work with athletes and so on. And man, they were just doing their money ass backwards. And they would get a bonus. And then, I mean, I heard this story. They literally, one of them from Wisconsin, chartered a plane and took a plane load of people to Las Vegas because they had a bonus. And the car dealers are giving them an Escalade and charging them interest and saying, I know you're going to get paid in 6 months. And so here's your car. And of course, they're happy to do that because they're going to make, 6 months of high interest on you while you're driving around showboating. So we have not been doing things in a logical sequence. And so when I look at our programs, I'm thinking we've got to train people to go through not only these programs, but go through it in the right sequence. Start with your middle school and high school students practicing investing. And that's what our stock market experience is. It's not real money. They all get $100,000, but it's fake money. But they're actually buying Nike stock at the same price that Nike stock really does cost, $105. And that deducts from that 100,000. So they're really seeing how it works. You got to click on the right buttons to execute the trade. So you're learning that and you're seeing how that stock price goes up and down. Then that just sort of gives them the exposure. Then we want to bring them into the C.L.I.M.B Youth Leaders Program, where they're going to have a little bit more time with us. And we're going to begin to build around some of that early exposure that they got, begin to help them to better understand concepts like net worth, compounding, the difference between profits versus just revenue. All of those are so key to really sort of penetrate this little mystery about building wealth. It's simple if you just learn all these kind of basic terms. So that's the C.L.I.M.B Youth Leaders. Then we want them to start investing, but it's like riding a bike. Put on your training wheels first and get into a club that is going to be all about learning and bringing a small group along the learning curve. And if you're just putting in $25 a month, then even if you make some mistakes early on, it's not a whole lot of money and it's not going to kill you. But then as you learn, you'll begin to then know how to work with larger amounts of money based on what you've learned and your experience. I was on the phone with a school teacher in Milwaukee. I'm so pleased that a group of school teachers have started one of our community-based investment enterprises, and it's going quite well. This guy was trained as an engineer. He teaches engineering for K through 12. But he said, when it came to investing, he was lucky to have an account advisor. So he's been investing through an account advisor for a very long time. But he said he really didn't know what they were doing, and they were just handling it for him. And he said now all of a sudden he's thinking about his 403B, which is a supplemental retirement, which is similar to a private sector 401k. It's like, Bob, can we actually manage that ourselves? And I'm saying, normally you can, and I'll do some homework to find out and confirm it. But there's a lot of opportunities right within our own grasp where we can be more hands-on with our own money. We can take more control, exercise more judgment. There's a whole nother backstory that is part of the school system, because many financial service companies have found the school system easy prey. Let's go and sell them the high commission annuities, even to people who don't need an annuity, but they don't know they don't need it. So they'll buy it because we can make it sound really good. And we're going to run all the way to the beach with a great commission because they're just going to buy it. So if you really did the research, you would find that across the nation, teachers have inordinately been sold annuities that were not appropriate for them. Here's this word, fiduciary. I don't know if you guys know the definition, but
I do.
It just means you've got to make your recommendations for your client. Best interest of the client.
Yep.
Well, you would think all financial services people have to do that anyway, but no, the law doesn't require that. Basically, some financial services companies opt into serving their clients as fiduciaries, but if they don't opt in, they are not obligated to present to the client that best choice that's truly in the client's best interest. And I've been, when I was an understudy learning about investing, I followed a guy in Chicago. He was written up in the Wall Street Journal and, seemed to be doing very well. And I asked if I could go down and shadow him. And after I saw what he did with a group, and he was African American and he was selling to a group of African Americans. And, I wasn't going to, bust his spiel in front of everybody. But when we were debriefing later, I said, why did you sell them that? You sold them the higher of the two opportunities, the higher commission cost. Yeah. He said, well, they still got a good product, but I was able to make more money off the one that I sold. It just kind of turned me sick to my stomach.
Absolutely.
Because the only reason you could do that is the folks didn't know to be that discerning about the fact that it was similar products, but one just kicked out a higher commission to the person that was doing the selling. And this is how, again, another term, caveat emptor, people hear me say that a lot. It's just a Latin term that means let the buyer beware. And it's one of the number one phrases in capitalism. Let the buyer beware. And you only got producers and consumers on the chessboard of capitalism. And the producers are the ones who make the money. The consumers are the buyers. Let the buyer beware. So producers, go ahead and produce, sell as you can sell, and it's all good. And that's what the fights are on Capitol Hill. Even the Protection Bureau. You would think that everybody would want that. But more than half of Capitol Hill doesn't even want the Consumer Protection Bureau.
Wow. Wow.
Buyer Protection Bureau is what they want. Sorry. Protection Bureau.
They have the Producer Protection Bureau on steroids. Don't get into the tax structure.
I have about 3 questions.
I know, right?
I'm trying to be like, first one I should ask, because there's just a few things I'm curious about, and I think I'm gonna just start with this one, then I'm gonna pass it to Opal. Do you think the word? I'm talking specifically about our community. Do you think the words stocks and investments may have somewhat of a negative stigma? Because, what you've just explained, I'm sure has been a number of people's experiences. When you start to hear stocks and Wall Street and investment, and sometimes I can have do you believe that in our community that has a negative stigma, and maybe that has contributed to us not fully embracing all of the concepts when it comes to financial literacy?
Yeah, you guys are a wonderful podcast because you ask great questions and you are spot on with that. The main word that I think has the biggest stigma around it is capitalism. Yet, in fact, we live in a capitalist society, whether we like it or not. And you guys have sayings like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, or if you're not playing, you're going to be played. And that's really how capitalism, can work. And so you're exactly right. And, you look back, I work with conservative economists. Most economists, I think, a lot of economists are conservative. I won't say most are, because, they firmly believe in the economic system, which is a capitalist system. So they're almost by definition kind of buying way into the system. But if you look about, how our whole country, at one point exploited labor. And then if you go way back, boy, did they ever exploit labor.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And so, if you're kind of on the bottom of the totem pole in capitalism, you do get a rough deal. You could almost call it a raw deal. Yeah. And so you're right, Corey. There's just a bad sort of taste in one's mouth about capitalism, stocks, companies, etc. But I just say that we're ill-advised to think we can take our ball and go home because home is the United States of America. So, you can't escape the system that we're in. So we need to learn it. Now, there are degrees of capitalism, because you'll hear the terms of hyper-capitalism, or even in quasi-collective economics, opposed to concentration of wealth by a few. You could have distributed wealth. And that's what I firmly believe in. And what I'm working toward is distributed ownership and not concentrated ownership by a few. But I am not advocating redistribution of wealth. One of the main reasons I don't is just that it's so politically hot. And I'm not trying to get into political hot water. Basically want to say we can do a better job of helping people who need to raise their wealth quotient by showing them how to do it. So I'm not really talking about redistribution. Some people do talk about that. I just don't. I'm talking about let's just roll up our sleeves and help people to understand. And that's why I like your questions about, you're asking from a young person's perspective, how do I get into this pathway of creating wealth? And, how do I monetize my passion? Those are the questions to be asking and to be figuring out how you do those things. And how do you do good while you're doing well? Those are all sort of compassionate capitalism pieces that I like to espouse.
Yeah, I feel like, Bob, I love the collective approach. So, for work, I'm always studying, especially, folks of color versus how white folks want to do business when it comes to finances, and Black and brown folks. Like, that collective is so different. It's so important. It means so much. And like, as you were talking and answering Corey's question too, like that trust factor is so huge. So do you see that with people, right? Where they're willing to together, right, take some risk, and they're willing to trust things because they have that collective with them, versus if it were just them by themselves. And I ask that because honestly, over us doing this podcast over the past year or so, like I've taken more risks in my own finances because we're learning together with all of the guests we bring on. So can you talk a little bit about if you've seen some of that with the folks over the past couple of decades who've been involved in your programs?
Sure. And then another shout out to CUNA and all credit unions, because they, by definition, are collective economics. Nobody owns the credit union. They're actually a nonprofit. And so they are practicing collective ownership, because in their case, it's the depositors that actually own and control the credit unions. And that trust factor is absolutely huge. It's interesting, going back to the athletes, because they would put, and I know personal case studies, they would emphasize trust in who they work with to manage their finances more than they do the expertise to manage finances.
Right.
But you can be misguided in your trust, because these individuals who either never even heard of fiduciary, much less it, they don't serve those athletes well. And so expertise is very important. We're working with an organization in Milwaukee that I think would be part of a great story for C.L.I.M.B if they would start an investment enterprise. And I had sort of delegated to a, professional level consultant to help get it started, because I don't live in Milwaukee, but he hit the trust wall. People were so unfamiliar with investing, and I don't think he was able to really get them over that hump of saying, well, I don't really know it, but I'll trust you and go ahead with this. They said, no, I don't know. It just doesn't seem right. So I'm going there next week, and I'm going to be meeting with them myself. We're going to buy pizza for everybody that'll show up and see if we can sort of get them to take a baby step, toward moving in this direction. So a part of the lack of trust is lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. And so you sort of back off and don't do something because you don't know enough. And so you don't trust the person that's sort of leading you along. And you're right, you have to trust the right person. If you trust the wrong person, it can be very disastrous. But then you said something that was key in your own experience. You're doing this podcast, you're listening, you're learning, you're doing a little bit more engaged with your own finances. Part of that is you're now taking more risk. And that's so key, because people can sit on the sideline and think they're not taking risk, but
Right.
inflation at 8%,
Yes, absolutely.
and you sitting on the sidelines getting 1% of your savings account, that's worse than a risk. You're just letting your money throw some of it in the river.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was. I mean, the whole trust thing. It kind of it sparked something in me, because it comes a lot up in like marketing and just regular, just like business decisions. Like people make decisions based upon feelings and not actual logic. So, and then a lot of people too, which is one of the reasons we started this podcast, was to help people in a down to earth way talk about these kind of topics. We want to ask the questions that you might be afraid to ask. You know, I mean, I think it takes a certain amount of maturity to get to the point to say, I don't know. I need to know.
Yes.
And become emotionally detached from that too. You know, when you're asking that person, you don't have to necessarily like that person, but if that person knows what they're talking about, you need to listen and absorb.
Absolutely.
I'm curious to, with the C.L.I.M.B program, are there opportunities like to integrate this into schools and community centers? Is that something that you do with that program as well?
Yeah. So I mentioned to the very large organization that got a grant recently, and they really are looking to engage with the schools. And you almost have to come with a fairly large amount of money to even get the attention of the schools, because they got so many pressures on them and they're pulled in so many different ways.
Oh, wow.
And C.L.I.M.B is still a reasonably small organization. And we've just not had success in spending our time and energy to truly integrate with the schools. I wish that we could. It would be layered, because you really have to bring the teachers along too. And a lot of times the schools are reluctant, just because the teachers don't want to have to teach something that they don't know, or they have to go back to school to learn. And so, to your point, we're finding a delightful experience working with community-based organizations. This, especially in Milwaukee, they have a lot of independent community-based organizations. And I'm working hard to get Will Green and Mentoring Positives to work with them. And
Shout out to Will. Shout out to Will Green. Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that we are going to be able to do some things. And we work a little bit with 100 Black Men and so on. But in those cases, some of the staff don't know much about investing. But to your point, two things. So one is they are supporting the youth learning, because we go there under the auspices that we're helping but the staff is sort of hovering over them. Unlike the teachers, we're not asking the staff to teach this stuff. We're just saying, bring the youth to us, sit in and listen, and, you know, handle any discipline problems. So we don't have to do that. But they're listening and they're learning. And then they become vulnerable and ask questions. And before you know it, we're working with the staff, the youth. And that's the best case scenario, because the investment enterprise model is an adult model. But we want youth to be part of those so that they can get that early start in going beyond just learning, but actually being part of a investment enterprise. So our mix is we like to have about 2/3 adults and 1/3 youth in an investment enterprise, so that they're all learning together. So that whole school thing is big, because again, there are affluent schools that are teaching this discipline. Kids are learning it, going into adulthood, again, knowing how to buy the Nike stock. And then others like me didn't. I worked at Chrysler. And I remember my first job out of law school, everybody was running around because Chrysler stock had hit rock bottom and they were buying the stock. And I was like, how do you buy the stock? I just didn't know. No one had ever sat me down And then somebody had me do a little stock market experience. He just said, pick a stock and follow it. Don't even buy it, but just kind of see how it fluctuates day to day. And I did that. And once I started learning, I was just blown away. How can it be that our society will let some people learn this, some people not learn this? Right. And those who know how to do this for 4 decades are way better off than people who just work and never learn how to tap into the capital markets. That's what investing is.
Absolutely.
What are opportunities for listeners that may be listening to this and say, you know what, you guys are absolutely right. I need to start today. I need to get involved. I need to start linking up with folks. What are the opportunities for adults? Actionable opportunities for adults to be able to participate in C.L.I.M.B.
So the website is CL.IMBusa.org. We also are doing a little bit more and more on social media with C.L.I.M.B Wave USA for Instagram and C.L.I.M.B USA for LinkedIn and Facebook. So that would be one thing, is just to start following in the social media. Then if you really want to get on the fast track and start doing some heavy lifting, then just contact us and say you want to start an investment enterprise, which is the beginning point of learning. And even if you've just got yourself, but you want to pull together a group, we have people on staff now who will give you the leadership and the hand-holding to help you get your club started. If you really are sort of a glutton for learning, go to betterinvesting.org, which is the 70-year-old nonprofit, and it's an infinite amount of recordings and webinars and so on that you could never even absorb all of it because there's so much there. And they're one of our collaborating partners as well. But if you wanted to kind of take it slower and just sort of listen in and see who we are and how we operate, just go to our C.L.I.M.B Youth Leaders Program and sign up to get the link for that and just start listening in. We did create something called the Community Association. That's the equivalent to a virtual town square where we meet just once a month, usually on the second Sunday at 4 o'clock Central Time. And we'll just pick a topic and have some conversation. I think I sent you guys the link for the last one, was a hip hop artist. And he came on and just talked about his own journey and
why is intelligent.
Yes,
you brought in an OG like a
financial literacy, is very important, and how he's tapped into the business markets through rap snacks. And this coming Sunday, January 8th, we're literally going to have the topic of community-based investment enterprises. Nice. So if this is aired prior to that, we would like that to be promoted. That 4 o'clock Central Time on January 8th, we're going to have a Zoom conversation with people from those case study investment enterprises that I was telling you about. So people can just hear from them firsthand, because that's how you begin to unravel the lack of trust, is where people can see others that look like them, just hear their personal stories. As a matter of fact, my nephew owes me a testimonial, and he's supposed to be on there on January 8th. He's one of the ones who took out $25,000 because they had a third child and they wanted to build a 5-bedroom home in Alabama. Well, fast backwards 25 years, he was like 12 or 13, sat on my steps when we organized the club. He didn't want any parts of it. With old people, and he will be the first to admit he was really opposed. But his mother said, we have something in our family called command performance. And that just means, we're calling all hands and there's no saying no. Use it. But when we say something's a command performance, then you're in, whether you like it or not. So he was in. His mom paid the $25 while he was a youngster, and it just kept building and building. And then when it came time for him to buy this home, I mean, this is a true story. This was maybe the first year of the pandemic, like early January. And they pulled together the down payment so fast, I almost called the name of the bank, but it's probably not kosher. The bank refused to believe it was their money. And as you might know, down payment is supposed to come from the buyer so that the lender will be confident that they really have the resources to afford the house that they say that they're going to. You know, he just told our treasurer that he needed his money. He was taking out $25,000, and you know, it comes in a nice little good-looking bank check. I plopped it down at that bank, and they just said no. And my nephew's wife called, and she was just really upset and said that, you know, it was like insulting, you know, that they just
very much so.
It was her money.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? They're going to make money off of you after you get that home, because you do the math, you'll see the bank makes more off that money than the house costs. And I said, so at the very least, you need to be doing business with some organization that you like.
Yes.
Because that organization that gets your mortgage is going to make money. Let that bank walk away. You haven't signed anything yet? They hadn't. They walked away. And I told them, Opal, I said, find a credit union.
Yes.
So they found one down in Auburn, Alabama. And the wife called me the very next morning, said she reached out to them. They were ready to meet with her that day, said, bring her package over there. She said it was an absolutely beautiful experience in terms of what had happened there.
That is beautiful. That matters so much, especially for us as we are killing these stereotypes, breaking barriers, changing things for generations. That service is huge, and we have choices. I'm so happy you shared that with them, that you don't have to go there. You have choices.
That's exactly right.
Which is one thing that wealth affords you like none other, is the ability for choice. I love all the stuff that you're doing with the youth, and even that example of your nephew there, where, you know, he started at 12 and was able to do this when he's grown with his family. But is it ever too late for folks? If we've got folks that are listening, is it ever too late to start doing this? And then my other part of that question is, do you also teach folks about wealth transfer when it comes to kind of the next generation too?
Great questions. It's absolutely never too late. But the corollary to that is the earlier, the better. So the other story about my family, I was telling someone earlier, that same young person, well, he had the third child, and that third child was born this year and is only about like 4 months old now. And he already is knocking on $1,000 door in the portfolio. He has $993 in the portfolio now. And so that's just to say the earlier, the better. I don't like to say it's ever too late, but it's clearly not the same if you're, you know, already close to retirement age, to try to think that you can make a whole lot of money off of investing, because your risk tolerance changes and the market does not always come back quickly. So if you're 5-10 years old and the market has a recession, it'll usually bounce back before you really need to pull the money out. But if you're already retirement age, you may or may not, you know, be able to wait out the market coming. And then you end up having to buy, to sort of sell your stocks to cash out while the market is low. And so, you know, that's one of the concerns there. And then what was your second part?
Just about, do you educate folks at all about just like wealth transfer and how important it is to have things set up for the next generation?
Yeah, and that's very important. That's sort of like the next phase of what I want to get to. Number one, we're doing it in our family club because it was my generation that got it started, and that we're now I'm the youngest, and all the rest are truly retired. So we've just installed one of our nieces as the president, and we're going to be training another younger person on the treasurer's role. What's interesting is people die, but companies can live on. And so our wealth transfer is really transferring the leadership and management of our family portfolio into the next generation. Now, we hope that they will be diligent as we were and keep it going. You can never guarantee. But that's one of the points about the investment enterprises. If you do it, especially at the family level, it actually becomes the vehicle through which a lot of the family's wealth can transfer. but there's probably 80% more that needs to be done in that area in terms of wills, trusts, and even insurance that can help with the wealth transfer process. You know, I'm still at such a basic level with things I'm doing with the community that I haven't gotten to what essentially would be estate planning, call it, but that's how you orchestrate the wealth transfer. I was talking with an attorney, and Go For It is one of those programs, Bradley, that's in the drop-down menu.
Yeah.
And that's our little youth entrepreneurship program. And it's sort of like a side thing, but it's important. And we just did one on real estate. Everybody encounters real estate, but why do we wait until it's time for them to buy a house? And then half the people are scared to buy a house because they just never got oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're teaching teens and young adults about, real estate. And hey, there's something out there called the cap rate. And if you're going to own multiple properties, you need to know what that cap rate is. And even if you can't calculate it now, listen out, just like fiduciary. Certain things you just want to know, you need to know later on if you don't know right now. Same is true with pro formas. So basically, I said that another area we want to talk about is this estate planning. And right now, it doesn't look like we'll even get to that until 2025. But we're already thinking about what are those topics that we want to roll out, because Go For It, we only do 2 sessions a year. There's sometimes a multiple series sessions, but we just take 2 topics a year. And so it looks like it may be 2025 before we get to that topic, but it's so crucial. I have a whole nother nonprofit, Land Rich. Website is landrich.org. And the challenge there is that people have passed away who own land, but they haven't really dealt with it through a will in a way that they're going to be able to be sure that it doesn't get escheated to the state, or, sometimes they just need to figure out how to monetize it and develop it. So that nonprofit is a little bit dormant right now, although we do have some good Wisconsin people that are helping with that. And mainly the focus of that one is down south. So once we get C.L.I.M.B USA sort of more function, I was kind of hesitating because I'm like, y'all really need to be helping me to run C.L.I.M.B USA. But once we really get the internal capacity of C.L.I.M.B USA, then I want to spend more time with Land Rich and kind of get that up as well. And that's going to be very much involved with the whole estate planning and wealth transfer because it deals with land.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, super cool. I had one last question, because I know we were talking about business structures, and you were saying that you would do for-profit. For investment clubs, are these usually, do you recommend that they do that a for-profit too, like a LLC, corporation, or is there a certain structure that you?
Well, that's a great question. First and foremost, investment clubs or investment enterprises are for-profit entities.
Yeah.
And like I said, Better Investing really pioneered this in 1951. Y'all the book.
Yeah,
you did.
Yeah. And so that's to say that the whole model was created before there was any such thing as an LLC. So the choices of business organizations were generally general partnerships, C corporation, then came along S corporation, and to some degree limited partnerships. So the overwhelming majority of investment clubs are general partnerships. However, some young people are opting to create their investment enterprise as a LLC. So those are the 2 forms that we are somewhat agnostic about. We'll talk about the pros and cons of either, with general partnerships being a more simple format that has less reporting and costs associated with it. LLC providing just a little bit more liability coverage limitations, so that, if there was malfeasance or something bad happened with the company, there's a little bit more protection of liability with a LLC than it would be a general partnership. And But the LLC, you do have to actually annually update it with the state of Wisconsin. And that annual update, of course, costs like $30, $40.
Yep.
It used to be more than that, but I think they reduced it. Whereas a partnership in Wisconsin does not have to be filed. Now, every state is different. And one of the things when we start growing C.L.I.M.B is I hope we can develop a grid so that people can look at any state and know what the filing requirements are and what the options, what the implications are for choosing an LLC versus a general partnership. And right now, I generally tell people, know who you're dealing with, do business with trustworthy people. A general partnership is going to be way simpler in Wisconsin, and I don't mind seeing people go that route. But if after all of the analysis, they decide they want to do it as a LLC, then I say go for it. A lot of stories about these investment clubs that have been around a long time, and there was one in Illinois, Wheaton, Illinois, that they literally converted it to a national mutual fund, and is now called the Moneta Funds. And they do promote youth investment education. So I've become, pretty good friends with them. I haven't talked to them in about 2 or 3 years, but they've been around a long time. And when I asked the guy his story about how they started their mutual fund, he said it had been an investment club, and it just grew, and they converted it to a mutual fund. So now the guy who started, his name is Bob. Looks about my age, and now his son is there. His son looks about y'all's age, and he's just cruising. So that's the other thing about intergenerational wealth. It's not just passing on your wealth, but pass on the wealth generator.
Yes.
I know people that may be listening will be thinking, can I actually participate? Sometimes we deny ourselves or create excuses of why we can't participate. So I did want to make sure that this is clear for those that may be listening. Are there prerequisites to one, start it, and then two, be a part of one that's created? Are there, credit score, go through credit history, application process, all these things? I always, I'm hoping to get these things laid out so that people don't see these as possible deterrents or barriers for entry. So if you could be clear about, what's needed, if there's some sort of application evaluation process to start and to be a part of it.
So first, I'm going to just talk in general terms. So if you've got a listener in Texas, Arizona, or wherever, it's the same. Be 18 or over, because that's the legal age for signing contracts. Some states might have a 21 legal age. I don't know, but generally it's 18. Beyond that, if you're trying to start an actual group of investors, like an investment club or investment entity, there's no other requirement other than just to be sure they're above 18. Now, there are some things, just like if you're out on the basketball court and you're choosing, your first pick, you're not going to choose, the shortest person. Can't even do a layup. Get people who are bringing something to the party. And so the same is true when you are pulling together your group. You want to be a person that brings value yourself, which means you're willing to do the work. In this case, what is the work? Showing up, for starters. When there's a meeting, you're there. It means doing some homework and learning so that you're not just a bump on the log, but you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do a little bit of learning. And then you're going to be a very good role model for other people. Your credit could be bad. I mean, I know family members and others who've had bad credit, but they learned and they, built it back up. And so, you basically don't want somebody who's maybe going to have a court order to garnish everything they own, and then they come into the portfolio garnishing something because of something somebody did. They still would only be entitled to garnish that person's part, but it would still be a royal pain to have that in place. And so this is the challenge of C.L.I.M.B, is that we're going into the more working class, underserved communities, and people don't always have a natural inclination to just even understand how important it is to show up, or how important it is to not every month say, well, I never got around to doing my assignment to prepare my stock presentation. Those are things that hold people back tremendously. And I can't tell you, especially when we were doing this the first go round several years ago, and I would talk to people about what we're doing, they'll say, well, I just don't have time. And in my head, I'm walking away from them saying, that person just told me they don't have time to make money, because that's basically what they're telling me. They got time to go see, Wakanda, and they got time to, go to the baby shower, all those things, but they don't have time to sit and learn how to buy Apple stock. It's just weird to me, because they don't really know what they don't know a lot of in our community. So the quick answer, Corey, it's no real impediment as long as you are of age. But the impediment is you've got to be willing to go down the road, which is not always downhill, and it's not always paved. It's an uphill inconvenience of being at that meeting when you're supposed to be. You got $25 a month. You got to divert now into the club as opposed to whatever else you were going to do with it. And, you've got to click on Yahoo Finance instead of finding out how many points Giannis got last night.
Yep. Yeah, that was going to be my question around that. Like, I love that you said that. So $25 to get started. There's no kind of minimum. You can kind of start where you're at and keep building.
Yes. And that's just been the going rate. I don't even recommend starting with too much more than that, because some people get over ambitious and they can't keep up with what they promise. And so it's just good to start with a minimal amount and just have the patience. That's the other thing to bring with you is a lot of patience, because this is not, I always tell people, this is not get rich quick, but it can be get rich slowly.
I love that. Yeah, and I think it's like that mindset piece you talk about. Like, I know Corey's always using that example of the fantasy football, right? Of just right. It's like it's just switching your mindset when it comes to finances. It's like so much of it is mental, so much of it is emotional, so much of it is how Corey's talking about all those barriers. So many of those are just what you think you can. When you hear investment, you think whole bunch of money, probably picture someone white. And I just love that, like you and others, what we're trying to do too is bring that representation to it. Even when you were talking earlier about the nonprofit versus the for-profit, like I think a lot of that is that we have seen leaders in our Black community, but most of them have been nonprofit leaders. Right. So they're like, okay, I can do that. She can do that. He can do that. I can do that. But we don't see that same on the for-profit or the private sector. It's so much, as you know, so much different. The percentages go way down for folks like us. So do you find that a lot of it is just letting folks talk through it or attend something that will slowly, because for me, it's been slowly change my mind on things until it becomes second nature.
Right. Yeah. And a guy on our board of directors, his name is Jamar Jones. He's a marketing specialist in Milwaukee. He wrote a book, Change Your Circle, Change Your Life. And it has to do with comfort zone. And so a lot of what you're saying, Opal, I think is understandable, because, and what is the 100 Black Men's motto? They will be what they see. They will be what they see. And so to your point, we are seeing professional basketball players. We are seeing nonprofit leaders. Some are seeing flashy gangbangers. But, where is the person in the Armani suit that's going to the 50th floor of the bank and pulling down the $3 million salary? There are some people doing that, but we just don't see them. So we don't know to even aspire to those things. And that's the whole thing about wealth too, which is really fascinating, because I was a money manager for a short time and just got out of it because I like to do the education and not trying to make money off of people by investing. That's a noble profession, but I got out of it. But when I was in it, I remember some people, that more than one, that, you sit down and you have to unpack what their financial picture looks like, because you have to determine what are your investable assets. You've got a certain amount that is your rainy day fund, or you are putting yourself through school. That money you can't really invest. But after you do all those things, what do you have left? And I've literally seen people come in who have a beautiful Cadillac or Mercedes parked out in the parking lot. They're dressed from Talbots or some expensive clothes from head to toe. And then when they lay out they have no investable assets, nothing. And I say all that to say that the people who are actually the wealthier, you do not see their assets. And so the people who are sort of showboating and playing the game of looking wealthy, they actually don't have money. And so these TV shows and, we see the flashiness of how some people dress in the cars that they have. And we aspire to that because it looks like they have money, but it's actually inverse. I've just seen it to be formulaically inverse. Those people who are modestly dressed, you saw that same sweater on them last week and they got it on again, and their car is several years old. They basically have a bank account and they have a portfolio. But the ones in the newest cars and, are always on Facebook because they were here, there, they were in New York. I know somebody, was trying to be seen in LA and Florida and New Orleans right now. And I'm just wondering, what do you have in your bank account? You're all over these places. And it's a whole, so the thing is, we don't see it. As a matter of fact, my dad used to say, and I didn't even know he had money because he was very quiet about it. And basically, that's another reason that I said, I want to talk about money. We don't have enough people in our community who are willing to just talk about money.
Yes.
And there are people, I can think of very successful people in Milwaukee, and they're doing well. And some of them own part of the Bucks. But I don't see them really, engaged in really sharing their knowledge about getting wealthy with other people. They're just doing it, and so it deprives our community from seeing it, learning about it, and understanding that it can be done. And so we really need a movement of sharing the information and creating a whole new set of role models, and somehow make it cool to see somebody in a 10-year-old car. Right now, that's just not cool, but it really is cool. And that's why we talk about the new bling, because I tell the kids to own businesses, land, and investments to build your net worth on a foundation of graduation. That's spelling out bling. And that's the real bling.
Nice.
Right, yeah,
whereas all that other stuff that people are showcasing and showboating is just not going to take them very far in their in their well-being and in their quality of life.
Yeah, there does come a point where it's you walk into the club and you got to start thinking, okay, how can I own the club? Like,
Yes. Yes.
like you know what I'm saying? Like, I want to get a few
Yes.
drinks, but I know this is my bar. Like this, I own all this, so I'm actually making money while I'm having a good time and helping, giving you a service.
That's exactly right. I walk into Kinko's all the time, and I'm thinking I gotta buy some FedEx Kinko's because I'm in and I haven't bought that yet, but I do own Apple and Microsoft, and I haven't even bought Nike yet, and I should.
Cool.
I think it's a great thing to leave folks as far as something to think about, and how much the psychology of it needs to be analyzed and changed. It's almost a mental rewiring in essence.
Yes.
And you've also laid out the platform, whether you did it on purpose or not. It felt like to me a call to action for those that do have that knowledge, that experience, that success to step into the arena of sharing and bringing the community along with you.
Absolutely.
So I think that's powerful and a great thing to leave our listeners. Let me bring up these websites one more time so that they can make sure that they can go check out C.L.I.M.B USA and see how, whether you're young, whether you're adult, there's a space for everyone to participate. And, we'll have to talk more off air. I know we've here and there about those investments clubs, and I think it may be time for us to be putting something together ourselves.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, you could actually do a reality podcast around your investment.
Yeah,
I love that.
That'd be dope.
Yeah, I was thinking
I
how
always
good
thought about that. That would be something just to follow in real time. It could be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking how good the BLK currency logo would look on that last flyer you sent. So we got to make that happen.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this. This has been wonderful. And like I say, the one main call to action will be January 8th, when we're going to talk about investment enterprises, and you'll hear some testimonials. It's not up on the registration is on the website yet, but it will be. It'll be in the last drop down program, Collective Impact Initiative. Our staff wouldn't let me create another program, so I had to just put it there under Collective Impact. Give us about a week, and then we'll have that up. And I'll send it to all of the 3 podcast hosts so you guys can have it and can get the word out. And then Corey and I are going to talk about, some ways that we can also use your platform to help promote what we're doing. We want to do that for sure. And I just have to say congrats to you guys, because you've stuck with it. You've made this a really good forum for having this discussion. And like I said, there are too few venues where we can just talk about issues relating to money and help to bring our mindset and our exposure along for getting into the pathways of real wealth creation. So really commend you guys for what you're doing. And I do want C.L.I.M.B to actually figure out ways to be supportive of what you're doing.
Awesome.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you. For our listeners, you know where to find us. Hit the link tree for everything. Black Currency Podcast, BLK Currency Podcast. Make sure to hit that. We have everything up on YouTube, so you'll be able to review this video and our past episodes, youtube.com/radio22. There's also a page on the myradio22.com page, BLK Currency Podcast, which will have links to the audio and the video, depending on how you like to listen or view this podcast. Mr. Wynn, I want to say thank you again. We always say, I think there's going to be a tradition, every season we got to have you somewhere close to the front.
I like that.
Got to set that tone.
Let's hope there'll be a lot of seasons to come.
Yes.
We
Thank you
appreciate
all
you
very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming and taking the time to spend with us to go through this. For everybody else, for our listeners, thank you. We appreciate it. We'll see you on the next episode. So y'all have a good one.
Peace.
Okay, thanks so
Peace.
much. All right, bye.
Ain't you sick of giving me your money?
I know he didn't do it,
Hold on
baby.
a second. Whoa, where you going?
No, I'm about to go make these trouble.